The second thing I want to talk about, this is going to be so left field, like what the fuck did this come from? But I actually thought this was super interesting, so I just wanted to share it on the podcast. So my boyfriend and I were eating waffles the other day, and randomly we were just like talking about it. Where did the idea of like this square grid pattern come from? Like, when you think about it, what is a waffle and where did it come from? Why are we eating these little cakes like shaped like squares? Like, what's the history of it? You know what I mean? Because like, you know, we eat we sometimes we do things and we're like, wait a second, like, why is this an appealing design, like these little square grids? So we were curious about it and we started looking it up. And I thought the history, like, we just literally like Googled the history of waffles, and we found a Wikipedia page like with this whole history of waffles. And we both found it so incredibly interesting. So I wanted to share it with you. So the first waffle, this blew my fucking mind. And by the way, not only waffle, but waffle iron. So waffle and the iron to create the waffle. The first waffle came from the medieval Greek times. That's how old waffles go back. And this was even more fascinating to me. The first waffle, where waffles came from and how we got to the waffles today, the very first waffle was the body of Christ. That was the first waffle. So I think that's really cool. Probably going to when I edit this podcast, I'm going to insert a photo of like what the first waffle iron and what, you know, those ancient waffles first looked like that were the body of Christ. This blew my mind because I'm like, how the fuck did they even heat up how did they make the iron? I just have a lot to learn about history, I guess you could say. And like, so to me, I'm like, how did, in the ancient Greek, like medieval Greek times, did they even have the means to make the iron and heat it up? I guess they were able to make they made things back then. So I guess they were somehow able to make the iron, and I guess maybe they would heat it up over a fire. That part I didn't look that part up. But so basically, that's where the first, like, every time you eat a waffle, you're basically eating a very evolved body of Christ, which is crazy. And so the first waffles didn't have those square shapes. I'm going to get to, like, you know, where that evolved. But the first waffles were like adorned with flowers, you know, whatever was popular back then. You know, they tried to make it beautiful to represent, you know, religion and the body of Christ. But I guess what happened was, over time, over centuries, different, mainly European countries, I think only European countries, and, you know, the United States obviously, would kind of have their own take and variation on the waffles. And it wasn't until I could be like, don't like take this, you know, verbatim, because I could be off, but I'm pretty sure it was the 16th century that, was it this? Yeah, it was. I think it was the 16th. It was either 15th or 16th. So you might want to look this up, and I don't have an assistant to like fact check this for me. But it was either the 15th or the 16th century that the first like square grid, like, you know, they went through all these different patterns of waffle shapes, and it was the 15th or the 16th century that the very first square, you know, grid shape happened. And I'm pretty sure I think it was the French and the Belgium that both had the square shape. They both did it. And that's where you get the name the Belgian waffle. Why the square shape ended up being the one that stuck with us, like, because there were these other like beautiful creations with like flowers. And so I don't know why, like, we decided like the square was the best one. But regardless, that's how we got there with the waffles, is that it's basically just a very evolved body of Christ. I would imagine, like, I couldn't find this in my research, but I would imagine the reason why we stayed with the square shape was maybe it just tasted better, like because of the fluffiness of it or whatever. I don't know. I think that's super fucking interesting. I hope I didn't just bore everybody, but I thought that was really cool. My boyfriend thought it was cool too, so I thought you guys might like that. Okay, I have one more thing I want to talk about before I get into the questions.